Something that a lot of Kenner Star Wars collectors talk about is vintage versus repro weapons. But what about vintage versus repro stickers? The main question I have about vintage versus repro stickers is what would their value be in comparison? I mean, if you have a ship that has repro stickers on it, does that decrease the value of it versus not having any stickers at all? Or versus having beat up original stickers? Like, it's very hard to gauge whether you should put repro stickers on a ship, or should you wait to see if you can find good original stickers. Like, as you can see, a lot of my stickers are beat up, but I have some good ones. So I'd want to wait for better stickers versus putting repro. But I also wanted to talk about vintage versus reproduction Star Wars weapons as well, because there are some differences that people say between them that are not necessarily true. The first thing I wanted to talk about was the float test, because the float test doesn't always work. I actually have a reproduction weapon that floats, and so I guess if it does sink, unless it's the axe and one other weapon, I forget what it is, then you know that it's a reproduction. But, I mean, if I have a reproduction weapon, if the one reproduction weapon I have is floating, then I suppose there would be more, Okay, so the first example that I have is this first run Stormtrooper blaster. Now, the reason why I say first run is that this weapon came from an original 12 figure. The reason why I know that is because I got these figures with these weapons from a family member who played with them a little bit probably, but he put them away and they're in really good condition and they still had their weapons. So how you can tell that this is a first run is that you can see the plastic is really dark. It has a slightly blue tint, but it's mostly a darker blue. I mean, if the light gets through it, it's kind of blue, but it's mostly a darker, almost black plastic. It's a really dark blue. Here's another weapon from the same run. It's Chewie's bowcaster, and as you can see, it's the same color. It's that dark blue, almost black color. So here's another example from the same run. The Smuggler's Blaster. And as you can see, very dark plastic. This one looks darker because it's a smaller weapon, so it has denser plastic. But it's that same really dark blue, almost black color. Then we start getting into the later weapons, and they start looking more blue, like a lighter blue. Look at that. And I actually got this blaster broken because the guy that I bought it from only sold better figures like Boba Fett with a weapon, and I could get it for a discount because it was broken. And I figured, I'll just glue it, but I never got around to it. I probably will. And so, basically, and I don't know for sure if this came with that Boba Fett, but it's most likely that this weapon came from a later series, whether it be anything after the original 12, basically, because that's where majority of the Star Wars figures were. So here is another example of a later weapon. This is a real Bespin blaster, and as you can see, it's made of pretty much the same plastic, maybe even a little bit lighter.
Here is the floating repro, and it looks really similar to a second series blaster. But the thing is that there's a couple things that you can tell about it. So here, when we line them all up, you can start to really see differences. So here's our first run Rill. And first of all, when you hold it up to the light like this, you can see through right here, the tip and the handle. Okay. But when you hold up the repro, you can't see through it at all. So the best thing is definitely the light test. The light test is definitely your best bet. But another way that you can tell is just by the molding of the plastic. Like, the real Kenner figure or blasters are going to have almost sharper edges, if that makes sense. It's very sharp tip right there. Sharp, well, sight, I guess is what it is, isn't it? And so this has more of a rounded over sight. So that's another way you could tell.